Is this the death of sales?
Sales numbers aren't looking so promising.
Worst year in more than a decade.
Right now, they're not buying.
No, not exactly.
Classical sales that does not care about retention is over.
SaaS has shifted from an acquisition at all costs approach to an approach that moves retention off the back burner. Sales isn't gone, it's just adapting to the times.
95% of businesses that distribute through product-led growth have a sales department.
With sales numbers at their lowest since 2020, it's essential to quickly provide value and monetize customers long term. However, it's not a cure-all.
So it's the combination of both, because PLG alone cannot survive. Sales-led growth alone cannot survive.
So sales isn't dead, but the landscape is definitely changing. So let's figure out what you need to do so you don't get left behind. A traditional view of sales evokes the thought of a man going door to door selling vacuum cleaners, or maybe it's someone at a cubicle shuffling through leads. Classical sales is focused firmly on ABC, and it doesn't care about any of the other letters of the alphabet that are on the dotted line. This is Leah Tharin. She's led product and growth teams, and through that has come to understand why sales needs a refresh.
People inherently do not trust salespeople because they know that they get money based on whether they are closing you or not.
Sales has now become more and more data-driven, where buyer personas and ideal customer profiles shape how you sell and who you sell to. But if your customer isn't actually using the product, they're not getting an honest representation of the product's value. All of that time and attention on making the sale isn't as valuable when retention is left on the back burner. Even though classical sales leads to a lot of customers, it also leads to a lot of broken promises. And with SaaS, broken promises mean churned customers.
If the competitor is disappointed and can easily switch to a competitor who is product-led, they will switch.
But if classical sales is over, then what's taking its place? Why shouldn't your sales team be scared? Well, it all starts with product-led growth.
Product-led growth commonly is referring to anything that has to deal with self-serving value towards the customers. Do stuff without having to talk to Gary from sales. A very prominent example is Slack.
Slack is the fastest growing SaaS startup in history. This can be attributed to the ease of onboarding, the number of integrations, and, you guessed it, their product-led strategy. Using the product is pretty straightforward. With the free plan, you aren't on a time limit. You can, for the most part, use the product and only upgrade as your team scales. Where you do run into restrictions, though, are with message history and the number of integrations. For folks who are just starting out, this isn't actually a massive barrier. By using the product before deciding to pay for it, potential customers are experiencing the value instead of being told the value. Slack knows this and even has a magic number, an aha moment that tells them when customers are ready to buy. And also, stick around for the long haul. Slack founder Stuart Butterfield has said that this number is around 2,000 messages sent. For a team of around 10 people, this is roughly a week's worth of messages. What makes this number so magical is that 93% of those customers have continued to use the product. But it wasn't just being product-led alone that drove their success. Making their pricing value-based was huge. This pricing model ensures that you're basing a product or service's price on how much your customer believes that it's actually worth. It's logical and not a burden to upgrade once you reach certain thresholds in a product, like 2,000 messages. The experience makes sense to the user and doesn't feel like a cash grab. We surveyed hundreds of B2B pricing leaders to learn how they make pricing decisions in our State of SaaS Pricing Report of 2023. We found that 60% of product-led companies are using value-based pricing compared to only 23% of sales-led companies. Then, we also looked at the most common pricing strategies by annual recurring revenue. The higher the revenue, the more common it is to see a value-based strategy. Around the $1 million ARR mark, value-based pricing is being used by just around 20% of companies. But above 100 million ARR, it jumps to 33% and even gets as high as 45% with $500 million ARR companies. So PLG is so great, sales teams should be worried, right? According to our index, sales are continually down, and there are very few signs of a rebound. Can our products completely speak for themselves now?
It's very, very clear that we need to have sales. The difference is that sales is becoming data-driven. Classical sales is really good in kind of figuring out, like, who am I talking to? Buyer personas, that kind of thing. Now, what we are trying to do from the product side, we are trying to give you usage data that you can use to combine it with this firmographics together to kind of not only figure out who am I talking to, but when is the best time to actually call them up in case it's necessary. It's not about sales versus PLG, it's actually about product-led sales.
With this strategy, data that's gathered through a product-led experience can help enable sales teams to make more informed decisions and increase efficiency. Companies are starting to capitalize on the advantages that this brings to expansion revenue.
So what HubSpot does is they take a very specific use case, so for instance, the marketing hub, and that marketing hub conceptually feels exactly the same as it is for a small marketing team as it feels for a big smart marketing team. Maybe in that company, we see how successful the marketing department is, and now we're going to cross-sell to the side to also sell something about the CRM. We really try to separate by use case whenever it's possible. And that's a product strategy decision that everybody can make.
By separating customers by use case with the help of PLG, sales teams are able to make more informed choices on how to go about upsells and cross-sells. So PLG is by no means the death of sales. Rather, it's the birth of a mutual relationship between marketing, product, and sales. There's often friction between these teams when it comes to aligning on success, and PLG helps to mitigate that by centering these teams on one single success metric. For Slack, it was figuring out that magical moment at 2,000 messages. It might be a tough conversation telling a sales team that's bringing in so much revenue that you're changing the way that they earn money, but it will lead to less friction down the line. It becomes about what percentage of people are actually reaching that aha moment and what's the best way to help get them there. With PLG, the focus shifts away from individual team goals and back to the customer, the area where it should have been this whole time. So how do you get your team aligned and start doing product-led growth the right way? There's a few crucial steps to getting started. Aligning that aha moment where value gets fully realized might be the best place to begin.
The very, very first step that any company has to do is to define what is the aha moment. And an aha moment is something that we can measure. So for instance, for a delivery driver, it could be the first time they actually successfully completed an order.
But just identifying that aha moment isn't enough. You need to find the best way to get your customers there, the fastest way that you can.
Is it important that the car is fast? Is it important that the car is safe? How does the product manager query for this aha moment? Just like starting simple, defining one signal and making sure that people can consume the data, but also surface it themselves and create business cases based on it, is probably the start of everything.
Next, the gap between sales and product isn't the only gap that needs to be filled for successful product-led growth. Your marketing team needs to change the way that they think about getting leads to both contribute to and reap the benefits of a good PLG strategy.
So marketing has always been struggling with this kind of blame game that starts like, hey, you have to bring us better quality leads. A very modern way to look at this. We can also start to measure how many of the people that you're bringing into the product per dollar are reaching the aha moment.
Click here to check out our webinar with Leah. You can ask her questions and learn even more about PLG. Or click here to check out the full interview.